Welcome back to a continuing conversation with Amit Chaudhuri. You were talking about this dialogue with dead writers. No, and obviously, you're looking at something much more profound and beyond dialoguing in a conventional sense. What is this dialoguing? What is the value?
Right. At any point of time, when you're doing something, you are surrounded by a rhetoric or even an orthodoxy of opinion about how it should be done or what its most valuable practice is.
But isn't that sort of located and responding to a social reality, conventions, preferences, a culture of that period? So what is the value of Lawrence?
So now you might find that you are on some level or the other not in agreement with that orthodoxy, you're not in agreement with that. As a fledgling writer, you are deeply uncomfortable, and as you continue to make your way as a writer and develop a sensibility which may not be absolutely comfortable with the dominant sensibility of the time.
And a great writer, of course, expands those boundaries and goes beyond that.
Whatever. I mean, you need to find other people to speak to, or you need to find confirmation in what you're doing in other writers. Now, when I began writing or began discovering my sensibility, which was a sensibility that prized, as I said, the concrete over the abstract, the physical universe over some sort of abstract narration, whatever that abstract narration might be. I was growing up in the 70s. The kind of intellectual orthodoxy at that time, I'm sure you'll remember, had largely to do with the French writers who were very important at the time. So we were all reading Camus, Sartre, and the emphasis on individuality, existentialism, all of that. Now here I was looking at the physical, the comical, the communal, in the sense of belonging to community. As using that to get out of this penumbra of the individual and discovering this sensibility in a handful of Irish writers, in the writers of the American South, like Eudora Welty or Flannery O'Connor, discovering it in certain Bengali writers like Bibhushan Banerjee. This is the dialogue I'm talking about.
Do you feel, in what ways do you feel influenced, inspired by Joyce?
I love Joyce's writing. I love Joyce's writing.
There is that texture in some of your writing that emerges.
His celebration of the shabbiness of the urban ordinary. Again, this is something I love. And I gradually began to, the whole process of identifying in yourself what you love, while at the same time admiring sensibilities which are prevalent at the time and are completely different from yours. This is a very, it's a process which is a very difficult process. At this point, certain writers give you confirmation of what you are. That is the process of dialogue I'm talking about, where you are trying to identify in yourself what you are when you're not finding it all around you. So either you meet some other writers who are doing the same thing together, and this happens to some writers at certain points of time, that they find others like themselves, or you turn to dead writers or writers from other places. In my case, I didn't have that many other writers I could make contact with, with whom I could feel I was, that we were fellow travelers in the same sort of cause.
And we're obviously not just limiting this to the notion of physical contact, but whose work you felt embodied and represented that, and so there isn't just a question of well, tell me sort of
I mean, much later, sorry to interrupt you, but much later I would discover other writers, and some of them through translation, and some of them much older than me. I mean, writers like Ashokamitran, many of the writers who write in the South, and not to speak of the Bengali writers I later discovered.
Well, there's always more to sort of talk about with a person of as diverse interests and talents as you have, and you've in fact also edited a collection of Indian writing, and not just Indian writing in English. But tell me, as in your role as editor and as literary critic, to an ordinary person who walks into a bookstore and picks up a book, what is a good book, a good novel, a good piece of writing? What sort of everyday yardstick do the person who is untrained use?
Right. For me, I mean, before one goes off into any sort of complex discussion on the matter, there's one simple criterion, and that is, can it be reread, or are there passages or paragraphs in it that are worth rereading? Are there sentences in it that are worth rereading? Will the book reward you if you look at those sentences and paragraphs?
Do you go back and reread
I reread
your own work?
Not my own. not so much my own work. Of course, sometimes yes. When the work is in draft form and you're trying to test it to see if it's any good, you do reread, and usually something that seems terribly exciting to you on the day you write it, if it seems to you boring the next day, then no amount of justification is going to take away from what the sentence is telling you. That is, take me out. I'm no good.
Well, you're just sort of still in your early 40s, and I have no doubt that from being a great writer and what shall I say, a promising musician, you're going to become evolve into being a greater writer and a great musician. But when you're 80 or 85 or 90 or I don't know, whatever age, what would you most like to be applauded as? Writer, musician, good human being, literary critic? Somewhat early to ask you that question, but what will come up for you?
I don't know what I would like to be thought at.
Is there an aspiration
I would like
at
to,
age 43?
I would like to be able to experiment, to have the freedom, the much valued freedom to experiment. Is a word with all kinds of avant-garde and cutting edge resonances. Leave those aside. The freedom to move forward and develop as you wish, in as many directions as you wish.
So here was a man who was deeply grounded in the classical music and literature and expanded the boundaries. Amit Chaudhuri, thank you very much. This has been a great pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.